I was sitting in the same church pew every Sunday for almost 2 years, and I never imagined that the quiet man who always sat beside me would one day place an old envelope in my hands and change the way I looked at my entire past. I had already decided I was leaving. My house was sold, the boxes were packed, my car was scheduled for pickup the following week. After 38 years in the same small Georgia town, I was finally walking away. I told myself it was because I needed a fresh start. But the truth was harder to admit. I was leaving because I was tired of feeling like my life had already ended. And then Daniel Hayes knocked on my door. He was holding a worn wooden box filled with memories I thought were gone forever. And inside that box was a letter that made me question whether I was really supposed to leave at all. Before I tell you what was inside that letter, I want to ask you something. Have you ever reached a point in life where you thought you knew exactly what your next chapter would look like? Maybe you moved away. Maybe you started over. Maybe you simply found yourself wondering if the best parts of life were already behind you. If you have ever felt that way, I would love for you to share where you are watching from tonight. And if stories about unexpected second chances mean something to you, consider joining me by liking this video and subscribing, because sometimes the most surprising chapters are the ones we never planned to write. My name is Evelyn Carter. I was 67 years old when this happened, and for most of my adult life, I was the person everyone depended on. I was the wife who remembered every appointment, the mother who solved every problem, the neighbor who brought meals when someone was sick, the woman who always showed up. But after my husband passed away 4 years earlier, something changed. Not all at once. That would have been easier. Instead, it happened quietly. The house became too large. The evenings became too long. And the silence after everyone went home became something I could no longer ignore. My children loved me. I knew that. But they had their own lives, their own families, their own responsibilities, and I began to realize something that many people my age understand. Being loved is not the same as being seen. That was the part I struggled with. I didn't miss having someone tell me what to do. I missed having someone ask how my day went. I missed sharing small things, a funny story from the grocery store, a beautiful sunset, a thought that came to me while making coffee in the morning, the ordinary moments, the ones you don't appreciate until they disappear. I first noticed Daniel because of something very simple. He sat beside me at church every Sunday, not directly beside me at first. There was always one seat between us. He was the kind of man who never demanded attention. He arrived early. He helped elderly members carry their things inside. He quietly donated to community projects without allowing anyone to make a big announcement about it. He was 69 years old, a retired architect, and had lived in Blue Ridge, Georgia almost his entire life. He had silver gray hair, kind blue eyes, and the calm confidence of someone who had learned that life did not need to be rushed. But what I noticed most was the way he listened. Daniel never looked at his phone during conversations. He never interrupted. He never seemed like he was waiting for his turn to speak. For someone who had spent years feeling overlooked, that was surprisingly powerful. Still, I kept my distance. I had spent enough of my life taking care of everyone else. I wasn't looking for romance. At least, that's what I told myself. Our first real conversation happened after church one Sunday, when a sudden rainstorm started while everyone was leaving. I was standing near the entrance, trying to decide whether I could make it to my car without ruining my dress, when Daniel appeared beside me holding an umbrella. "You know," he said with a smile, "after all these years in Georgia, you'd think we'd learn that the weather doesn't care about our plans." I laughed. It was a small thing, a simple joke, but I remember it because I hadn't laughed like that in a long time. Not politely. Not because someone expected me to. A real laugh. That afternoon, he walked me to my car. We talked for maybe 10 minutes. About books, about old movies, about how the town had changed over the years. Nothing dramatic happened. No grand moment, no instant connection, just two people realizing that conversation with each other felt easy. After that, we started talking more, never in a way that felt forced. Sometimes after church, sometimes at community events, sometimes when we happened to meet at the local market. Daniel had a way of making me feel comfortable without making me feel like I needed to impress him. And that was new for me. Because after losing my husband, I had quietly developed a fear that I was no longer the kind of woman someone noticed. I wasn't 25 anymore. I wasn't trying to be. But somewhere along the way, I had started believing that beauty, excitement, and romance belong to younger people. Daniel challenged that belief without ever saying he was doing it. He noticed things, small things. He noticed things. He noticed when I changed my hairstyle. He noticed when I seemed tired. He remembered stories I had mentioned weeks earlier. One afternoon, I was telling him about my childhood home, and he surprised me by remembering the name of the street I grew up on. "You actually remembered that?" I asked. He looked almost confused. "Of course I did. You were telling me something important." That sentence stayed with me, because I realized how long it had been since someone treated my memories like they mattered. But just as I started allowing myself to enjoy his company, I made a decision that changed everything. I decided to leave Blue Ridge. The decision wasn't sudden. It had been building for months. My children had encouraged me to move closer to them. They thought a smaller home in another state would be easier, more convenient, safer. And maybe they were right. The house I had shared with my husband held too many memories. Every room carried pieces of a life that was gone, so I put it on the market. I started sorting through 38 years of belongings. Old photographs, letters, Christmas decorations, things I hadn't touched in decades. And with every box I packed, I felt like I was closing a door, not just on a house, on a version of myself. Daniel knew I was leaving. I told him one Sunday morning after church. He didn't try to convince me otherwise. That was one of the things I respected about him. He didn't act like he knew what was best for me. He simply looked at me and said, "If leaving is what you truly want, I hope it gives you peace." I smiled. "That's a very polite way of saying you don't want me to go." He laughed softly. "Maybe it is." For a moment, neither of us said anything, and that silence told me more than words could have. There was something between us, something neither of us had named, but I was determined not to complicate my life. I had spent years building stability. I wasn't about to risk everything because I enjoyed talking to a man, or because I liked the way I felt when he looked at me. So I packed my boxes. I signed the papers. I prepared to leave, and then, 3 days before I was supposed to move, Daniel Hayes knocked on my door, and he was holding something I never expected to see again. Before I continue with my story, I want to share something with you. If you enjoy heartfelt stories about love, second chances, and unexpected moments in life, my book, Confession of Unexpected Love, was written with you in mind. It is the kind of story you can enjoy during a quiet weekend, while traveling, or simply relaxing at home. If you would like a copy, you can find the link in the pinned comment. Now, let's get back to my story, because what Daniel brought changed everything. When I opened the door, I expected to see a goodbye, maybe a kind gesture from a friend, maybe a final conversation before I left town. What I did not expect was Daniel standing there holding a small wooden box I had not seen in almost 40 years. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I looked at the box. Then I looked at him. "Daniel, where did you get that?" He lowered his eyes for a moment, almost like he was deciding how much of the truth to tell me. "I found it while helping clear out my brother's old storage unit." That answer only created more questions, because I knew that box. I knew the scratches on the corner. I knew the small brass latch that never closed properly. It belonged to my mother. And inside that box were things I thought had disappeared forever. Daniel handed it to me carefully. "I almost gave it to you months ago." I looked up at him. "Months ago?" He nodded. "There was something inside that I thought you needed to see, but I didn't think it was my place to bring it to you." That was Daniel. Even when he had something important to say, he never forced his way into someone else's life. He waited. He respected boundaries, and somehow that made me even more curious. I invited him inside. The same house I had spent weeks preparing to leave suddenly felt different. Not because the walls had changed, because someone from the life I was about to abandon had walked through the door. I placed the box on the kitchen table and opened it slowly. Inside were old photographs, a few handwritten notes, a small silver necklace my mother used to wear. And underneath everything else was an envelope. My name was written across the front. Not my married name, my maiden name. The handwriting stopped me completely, because I recognized it immediately. It was from my father, a man who had passed away when I was 30. I hadn't seen his handwriting in decades. My hands were shaking slightly as I opened it. The letter was not long, but every word carried a part of my past I had forgotten. My father wrote about how he had always worried that I spent too much of my life trying to make everyone else happy. He wrote that I had always been the responsible one, the dependable one, the person who carried everyone else's burdens. But he wrote one sentence that I have never forgotten. He said, "Evelyn, don't confuse being needed with being loved." I had to stop reading for a moment, because those words found a place in me that I had been protecting for years. I had spent so much of my life measuring my value by what I did for others, as a wife, as a mother, as a friend. But somewhere along the way, I stopped asking what I wanted. Daniel sat quietly across from me. He didn't interrupt. He didn't try to explain the letter. He simply allowed me to feel whatever I needed to feel. And that was when I realized something about him. Daniel wasn't trying to save me from leaving. He wasn't trying to become the hero of my story. He was simply giving me back a piece of myself. After I finished reading, I looked at him. "Why didn't you give this to me sooner?" He took a slow breath. "Because I was afraid you would think I was using it to make you stay." That answer surprised me, because he was right. Another man might have used that moment. He might have said, "Maybe this is a sign you belong here," but Daniel didn't. He respected my choice. And suddenly, I understood something. The reason I trusted him was not because he made me feel needed. It was because he made me feel free. Over the next few days, everything became more complicated, because I still had a decision to make. The house was sold. My belongings were packed. My new life was waiting. But now I had to ask myself a question I had avoided for months. Was I leaving because I truly wanted a different future? Or was I leaving because staying meant admitting that I still wanted more from life, including from Daniel? That question frightened me, because wanting companionship at 67 felt vulnerable. There is a strange pressure that comes with growing older. People expect you to become smaller, quieter, less interested in new beginnings, as if reaching a certain age means you should stop wanting excitement, stop wanting connection, stop wanting to be seen. But Daniel reminded me that life does not end because it changes. A few days later, I met him at the church. Not for a service, just to talk. I needed to make a choice. And for once, I wanted to make it for myself. I thought leaving would make things easier, I told him. Daniel looked at me. Would it? I smiled sadly. I don't know anymore. He nodded. Then maybe you need to find out what you actually want, not what everyone expects you to want. That was the moment I realized something. Daniel was not the reason I needed to stay. He was the person who helped me admit that I had a choice. There is a big difference. So I made a decision. I did not cancel my move because of him. I did not stay because a man had appeared at my door. I stayed because I finally admitted that I was not running toward a new life. I was running away from the one I still cared about. I sold the house, but I changed my plans. Instead of leaving Blue Ridge forever, I moved into a smaller home just outside town, a place that belonged only to me, a place where I could create something new without erasing everything old. And Daniel? He didn't suddenly become my entire world. That was never what made our relationship special. He became my companion, my friend, the person I looked forward to seeing. The person who knew my stories and still wanted to hear more. Months later, we sat together at church again, only this time there wasn't an empty seat between us. He reached over and smiled. Funny how we sat next to each other for 2 years before either of us admitted we enjoyed it. I laughed. I think we were both being stubborn. Probably. And maybe we were. Maybe we were both afraid. Afraid of looking foolish. Afraid of starting over. Afraid of admitting that even after everything life had taken from us, there were still parts of ourselves waiting to be discovered. Daniel and I did not get a perfect ending. Real life rarely works that way. We still had disagreements. We still had moments where our pasts followed us into the present. But we also had something I never expected to find again. A person who noticed. A person who listened. A person who reminded me that being older did not mean becoming invisible. The last time I walked through the house I once planned to leave forever, I found one final box I had forgotten to unpack. Inside was the old envelope Daniel had brought me. The one that started everything. I held it for a long time, and I thought about how close I came to walking away from a place and a person that still had meaning for me. Sometimes we believe we are searching for a new beginning. But sometimes, we are simply being given the courage to recognize the life that is still waiting for us. And that is exactly what Daniel gave me. Not a reason to stay, a reason to choose. Before I say goodbye, I want to share something special with you. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to read my book, Confession of Unexpected Love. It is a story you can keep beside you during a quiet weekend, take with you while traveling, enjoy on a peaceful afternoon, or share with someone who believes life can still surprise us. Because some stories are more than entertainment. They remind us of the moments we treasure, the connections we value, and the hope that new chapters are still possible. You can find the link in the pinned comment below. And if you enjoyed spending this time with me, please consider liking this video, sharing it with someone who loves heartfelt stories, and subscribing to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next story of love, unexpected connections, and second chances. And I would love to know, where are you watching from tonight? Leave a comment and tell me. I always enjoy seeing how far these stories travel. Thank you for being here with me.